Hey there, I'm Pastor Lamar with Woodin Valley Baptist Church. We are so grateful that you tuned into one of our services. Our prayer is that the Word of God would touch your heart and change your life. Enter in with us now as we head into a live service right here at Woodin Valley Baptist Church. I hope it's helped to you. God bless.
I'll testify over and over again, over and over again, how lost I was, how saved I am, how saved I am. Life will have its ups and downs. Should I come or go, say yes or no? It can be hard to figure out. But as a child of God, I'm not on my own. I can go directly to the throne. So I find a quiet place and I begin talking to the King, the one who made everything and gave his life for me, so I could be redeemed. Talking to the King, I know he's always listening. He loves and cares for me, and he meets my every need. What a joy to spend time every day talking to the King. It won't be long and I'll be moving on. When my time has come, my race is run, I'll leave this world behind. As a child of God, I'll enter my new home, and I'll go directly to the throne. For the first time in his presence, I will be talking to the King, the one who made everything and gave his life for me, so I could be redeemed. Talking to the King, I know he's always listening. He loves and cares for me, and he meets my every need. What a joy to spend time every day talking to the King. He's my Savior, Creator, and he's coming back for me. But until that trumpet sounds, every day I will be talking to the King, the one who made everything and gave his life for me, so I could be redeemed. Talking to the King, I know he's always listening. He loves and cares for me, and he meets my every need. What a joy to spend time every day talking to the King. Talking to the King.
Awesome. here among us in all his majesty. We have come to honor our gracious King of Kings. He has been so faithful, and he will remain. Join us as we worship, crown him with praise. Awesome, magnificent, all-sufficient God, eternal Redeemer, through his precious blood, our fortress forever, on his name we call. Awesome, magnificent, all-sufficient God. Shake hands with your neighbor and say it's good to be in the presence of the blessed Holy Trinity. Let us lift our voices to Christ who reigns above, generously granting mercy, grace, and love. Awesome, magnificent, all-sufficient God, eternal Redeemer, through his precious blood, our fortress forever, on his name we call. Awesome, magnificent, all-sufficient God, our fortress forever, on his name we call. Awesome, magnificent, awesome, magnificent, awesome, magnificent, all-sufficient God.
He's good on the mountain, he's good in the valley low. He's good in times of trouble, that's why I love him so. He's good while I'm sleeping, he's good when I'm on my knees. He's good though I'm unworthy, he is good to me. I don't worry when the skies are gray, and I don't bother with the dart Satan throws my way. For the one who cares for sparrows and the lilies of the field is the one who calmed the violent storms when he says, peace be still. He's good on the mountain, he's good in the valley low. He's good in times of trouble, that's why I love him so. He's good while I'm sleeping, he's good when I'm on my knees. He's good though I'm unworthy, he is good to me. In the sunshine and in the rain, he is still the King of Kings who remains the same. He's faithful to his children and his promises are true. If he says he'll always be there, then that's exactly what he'll do. He's good on the mountain, he's good in the valley low. He's good in times of trouble, that's why I love him so. He's good while I'm sleeping, he's good when I'm on my knees. He's good though I'm unworthy, he is good to me. He's good on the mountain, he's good in the valley low. He's good in times of trouble, that's why I love him so. He's good while I'm sleeping, he's good when I'm on my knees. He's good though I'm unworthy, he is good to me. He's good while I'm sleeping, he's good when I'm on my knees. He's good though I'm unworthy, he is good to me. He's good though I'm unworthy, he is good to me. He is good to me.
While walking down a memory lane not so long ago, Satan came right by my side, making me feel whole. He brought up thoughts of hurt and pain when I had gone astray. He wanted to discourage me as I walked along my way. He said, you're undeserving, 'cause I know where you've been. I have a record of your life when you were bound by sin. I know your darkest secrets that you would never tell.
So I appreciate that. All right, let's grab our Bibles tonight. Quickly go over to John chapter number 6, if you would. Go to John and chapter number 6. And as you turn to John 6, I know it's been a while since we've been in this series, but I want to remind you of our theme verse and what Peter says in Acts chapter 2 and verse number 22. Peter says this on the day of Pentecost. He says, "Ye men of Israel, hear these words, Jesus of Nazareth, a man," and then he says, "approved of God among you by miracles and wonders and signs, which God did by him in the midst of you," or in front of you, "as ye yourselves also know." And it's verse 22 that we get the title for our series that we're going through in regards to the miracles of Christ, Approved of God. Approved of God. And the word approved, it appears right there in our text. It is the Greek word apoikonomi, and it means to show off, to exhibit, to demonstrate, to accredit. I love that word, accredit, or to show forth. In other words, God through Peter is saying this: the miracles accredit Christ. They accredit Christ. What do they accredit? His claim to be God, his claim to be messianic, and his claim to be all-powerful and have all authority. So that means this, that when Jesus would perform a miracle, he was not merely causing the blind to see, and he wasn't merely causing the lame to walk and healing the man with the withered hand that we're going to look at next week, or feeding the 5,000 that we're going to look at tonight. He wasn't just meeting the physical needs of the individuals that would receive a miracle. He was proving or validating his authority. He was validating his power, and certainly that could be said of the miracle we're going to look at tonight, the famous miracle. I'd say it's probably the second most known behind the resurrection of Christ. And so let's look at this in John chapter 6 and verse number 1. Go ahead and stand together. Let's read John chapter 6 and verse number 1. "After these things, Jesus went over the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias, and a great multitude followed him because they saw his miracles, which he did on them that were diseased. And Jesus went up into a mountain, and there he sat with his disciples, and the Passover, a feast of the Jews, was nigh. When Jesus then lifted up his eyes and saw a great company come unto him, he saith unto Philip, Whence shall we buy bread that these may eat? And this he said to prove him, for he himself knew what he would do. Philip answered him, 200 pennyworth of bread is not sufficient for them, that every one of them may take a bite. Verse 8, one of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, saith unto him, There is a lad here, which hath 5 barley loaves and 2 small fishes, but what are they among so many? And Jesus said, Make the men sit down. Now there was much grass in the place, so the men sat down in number about how many? 5,000. And Jesus took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed to the disciples, and to the disciples, he distributed to the disciples, and the disciples to them that were set down, and likewise of the fishes, as much as they would. When they were filled, he said unto his disciples, Gather up the fragments that remain, that nothing be lost.
Therefore, they gathered them together and filled 12 baskets with the fragments of the 5 barley loaves, which remained over and above unto them that had eaten. Then those men, when they had seen the miracle that Jesus did, said, This is of a truth that prophet that should come into the world. And so very simply, we're going to look at this miracle. The title of the miracle is the title of the message, just like with every week, the feeding of the 5,000. The feeding of the 5,000. You can be seated. We're going to look at the feeding of the 5,000. And up until this point, every single miracle that we have covered, every single miracle has appeared in maybe 1, 2, at the most 3 of the synoptic gospels. But what I found interesting about this particular miracle that we're going to cover tonight, this is one of the only ones, or it is the only one, aside from the resurrection of Jesus, it is the only one that appears in all 4 of the synoptic gospels. I found that pretty interesting. It's pretty important where he would mention it in all 4 of the gospels. And another thing I want us to also remember is that Jesus has gained quite a following. He's accumulated quite a following since he began these first of miracles. We read about that in John chapter number 2. When he turns the water into wine, at that point, he only has about maybe 5 or 6 followers. But at this point, we see that it's grown into several hundreds, maybe even thousands of people. As a matter of fact, John chapter 6, verse 2 of our text, it says this, And a great multitude followed him because they saw his miracles, which he did on them that were diseased. So there's a great multitude following Jesus. But I can't stress this enough. Jesus was not interested in gaining a crowd. He wasn't just interested in gaining a giant following. He was interested in the hearts of the people that were following him. In other words, he's not just interested in gaining a crowd. He's not just interested in a bunch of groupies that are going to follow Jesus. I would argue, when we're going to see this in a little bit as his crowd begins to deplete, he's not interested in gaining a following of people that want to see Jesus do something for them. He wants them to follow him for who he claimed to be, which was this, the Messiah. He claimed to be God. That's actually the heart of all of the miracles. That's why he would perform these miracles. Again, it's not just to fix the physical infirmities of the people that would receive a miracle. The definition of a miracle that we gave in week number 1 is it's the manifestation of the glory of God through Christ for a purpose. And what is that purpose? Then this, belief. I want the people to believe not just that I can fix their problems, but that I have, again, all power and all authority. And that is on display in one of the most famous miracles, again, the feeding of the 5,000. And it's not going to be very complex tonight, not even very deep. It won't take a long time, famous lies of the preacher. But a couple things I want you to notice tonight in light of the feeding of the 5,000. Number 1, I want us to see this. The scene is set. The scene is set. Say that with me. The scene is set. Again, because the miracles are found in all 4 Gospels, or this particular miracle is found in all 4 Gospels, we have the luxury of jumping back and forth between the accounts to gain a different perspective of the same miracle. And so go over to Matthew really quickly. Go to Matthew's account of this miracle in Matthew chapter 14 and verse number 1 and verse number 2. It says, At that time, Herod the Tetrarch heard of the fame of Jesus and said unto his servants, look at this statement, This is John the Baptist. He is risen from the dead, and therefore mighty works do show forth themselves in him. And so he says that Jesus is actually just a resurrected form of John the Baptist. And we're not going to read the rest of the passage, but it goes on to talk about the news being delivered of the execution of John the Baptist to Jesus. And this is not a story about John the Baptist, but I'd be remiss not to even mention this. I love John the Baptist for his boldness. The reason that he gets executed is because he points the Baptist finger in the face of Herod the Tetrarch and calls him out for his fornication in taking his brother's wife. And in turn, his daughter asks for the head of John the Baptist, which he delivers on a silver platter. And so word travels back to Jesus about the execution of John the Baptist. Skip down to Matthew chapter 14, verse 12. That puts it into context. And his disciples came and took up the body, that's John's body, John the Baptist. They took up the body and buried it and went and told Jesus. When Jesus heard of it, he departed thence by ship into a desert place apart. And can you imagine the feeling of sorrow that Christ must have felt when he heard of the execution of John the Baptist? I mean, that was his friend. He was the front runner. He was the one who said, "Behold, the Lamb of God that taketh away the sins of the world. Hear ye him." He's the one who was, the front runner of Jesus Christ. And so Jesus gets into a ship and he goes across the Sea of Galilee after hearing the news of John the Baptist, and his 12 disciples go with him. But this is interesting to note. In John's account, it actually tells us where they were prior to departing over the Sea of Galilee. And this is important. I want you to get it. Look at John chapter 6 and verse number 1. It says, "After these things, Jesus went over the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias." It's the Sea of Tiberias. You're not getting it. So I want you to, everyone do this. How many of you have a physical copy of the Bible tonight? You have a physical copy. I want you to go to the back of your Bible and go to the maps. Go to the maps. Go to the maps. Usually you're in the maps when the preacher gets boring and you start to want to look. Why are some of you already turned there right now? That's the part of the Bible that some of us don't reference, but I want you to go, and if you don't have it, that's okay. We've got it on the screen here. But I want you to locate where Tiberias is. Can you see it on the screen there? Tiberias. Then on the left bottom hand of the screen there, Tiberias, that's where they would have launched from. It's the Sea of Tiberias. In other words, it's all the Sea of Galilee, but when they attach a city to the name, it's talking about where they would have launched from. The Sea of Gennesaret, the Sea of Tiberias, the Sea of Bethsaida. And so they are launching from Tiberias, but where do they end up? John's gospel doesn't tell us, but Luke's gospel does. Go over to Luke in chapter number 9 and verse number 10. "And the apostles, when they were returned, told him all that had done," talking of the execution of John the Baptist, "and he took them and went aside privately into a desert place belonging to the city called Bethsaida." You see that? So they launched from Tiberias and they end up in Bethsaida. And although Matthew and John's account don't say specifically where they end up, all of these are in harmony with one another. That's why you need to study these miracles in all of the different gospel accounts. Because what one will leave out, the other will leave in. And what one will leave in, the other will leave out. But they never contradict each other. Why? Because it's perfect. All of them are just different perspectives, and all of them mention, or rather some of them mention where they launched from, some of them mention where they end up, and it's actually in perfect tandem with Matthew and John's account, because he's going to leave Bethsaida, and he's going to go into Gennesaret, and he's going to go into Capernaum to perform other miracles. But again, notice right there, locate Tiberias, and now locate Bethsaida. Do you see that? They're on opposite ends of the Sea of Galilee. Do you notice that? Why is that important? Well, it's important again to consider all the different accounts of the same miracle, because it answers a question that all of us might have. Why is it significant that they left Tiberias and they end up in, not Gennesaret, but they end up in Bethsaida? I want you to look at Matthew's account, Matthew 14 and verse number 13. "When Jesus heard of it, he departed thence by ship into a desert place apart, and when the people had heard thereof, they followed him." And how did they follow him? Next two words, on foot. Say with me, on foot. They followed him on foot out of the cities. Did you catch that? You catch the significance now? So they leave Tiberias, and the 12 disciples with Christ get into a boat after hearing of the execution of John the Baptist. They go to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, and there are people that follow him not by sea, but they follow him on foot. You want to talk about dedication? Look at all of the followers of Jesus. I don't know what that would have looked like, but as Jesus gets into the boat and he departs, they're sitting there and they're following him on the shores of the Sea of Galilee. Furthermore, Matthew's account tells us that the congregation probably grew because they came out of the city. And so as they left there in Tiberias, as Jesus is talking and he's teaching and he hears about John the Baptist's execution, he's got a great following. But by the time that he gets to the other side, people are coming out of the cities and they're following Jesus on foot around the city around the Sea of Galilee into the place, the desert place on the mountainside called Bethsaida. And so I'm simply saying that's dedication. That's dedication. This great group of people follow him on foot, but nonetheless, the great multitude, they're following Jesus. They end there in Bethsaida, and Jesus' nature takes over. Go to Mark's account. Look, we're going all over the place, but I'm going somewhere. Go to Mark's account now, chapter 6. Mark chapter number 6. Jesus does what Jesus does. Look what he does. In verse number 34 of Mark 6, it says, "And Jesus, when he came out, saw much people and was moved with compassion toward them." He was moved with compassion toward them because they were as sheep not having a shepherd, and he began to teach them many things. Jesus sees a crowd, and Jesus does what Jesus does. He's moved with compassion on them because they were scattered like sheep without a shepherd. And here's what he begins to do. He begins to teach them. He begins to instruct them. And he teaches and instructs them for a greater part of the day. And that's when his disciples, right on cue, come to him with a dilemma. Look at the next verse in verse number 34 or 35. It says, "And when the day was now far spent, his disciples came unto him and said, 'This is a desert place, and now the time is far past. Send them away.'" Send who away? The congregation. Send the multitude that was following Jesus, that he was teaching, send them away, that they may go into the country round about and unto the villages and buy themselves bread, for they have nothing to eat. And I thought this was interesting. Listen, Jesus was motivated by compassion, but his disciples were motivated by convenience. They were motivated by convenience. Jesus understood what their actual need was, and it's not food. Their actual need was they were scattered abroad as sheep having no shepherd. So Jesus looked beyond their fault and he saw their need, but they looked beyond their need and saw their fault. And the Lord used this to convict your pastor even this week. When it comes to looking at the people that we encounter, so often we are moved, unlike Christ, we're moved by convenience, not compassion, but that's not the nature of Jesus Christ. Anytime that there's a multitude, you see that Jesus takes time for the multitude, not to just meet their physical need, but more importantly, to meet their spiritual need. And I thought about the words of the choir that they sang just a couple of weeks ago that Pastor Rigo sang. He looked beyond my fault and saw my need. How many of you are thankful that Christ looked beyond your fault and saw your need? But again, so often we look beyond people's needs and we see their faults, but not Jesus. Not Jesus. So we see that the scene is set for this miracle. But number two, we see this, the disciples fret. The disciples fret. Say that with me. The disciples fret. So Matthew and Mark's account detail the disciples rush to get the people to leave, to go. Let's call it quits and let's pick up the teaching for another day. But actually, John's account explains Jesus' proposal as an alternative to dismissing these people when they have a physical need. Look at John chapter 6, verse 5. When Jesus then lifted up his eyes and saw the great company come unto him, he saith unto Philip, Whence shall we buy bread that these may eat? Verse 6 is important. And this he said to prove him, for he himself knew what he would do. Has it occurred to you, Jesus has never asked a question he doesn't know the answer to? We've established that he's God, right? He's all-knowing. Matter of fact, we're not reading in this account, but in most accounts, he hears the thoughts of the Pharisees and the scribes. They reasoned within themselves, and then Jesus answers what they didn't say out loud. So when Jesus asks a question, it's not because he doesn't know the answer, and specifically with this question, he knew what he was about to do, but he wanted to know if the disciples had faith in his capacity to do it. As a matter of fact, it dissects in John's account two different disciples. Let's look at them together. Letter A, the synopsis of Philip. The synopsis of Philip. Look at verse number 7 of John chapter 6. It says, Philip answered him, 200 pennyworth of bread is not sufficient for them, that every one of them may take a little. In other words, we can be assured that Philip was a homeschooler. According to my calculations, he's saying the math ain't mathin'. That's what he's saying. And he uses this phrase in our English Bible here. It says penny's worth, but denarii is what that word is. Denarii, and a denarii would simply be, or denarius was at that time an ordinary day's wage. It was a day's wage that would have taken the needs of one particular family. So if half was spent in food, then reckoning the family at, let's just say, 5 persons per family, 1 denarius would feed 10 persons, and 200 would provide a day's rations for about 2,000. That's a convoluted way of saying that he does the math and he says this, math ain't mathin'. We have maybe enough to feed 2,000, but we know that after he calculates the people that are sitting there, there are 500 or 5,000 men. That doesn't include women and children. Some estimate it might be 15 to 18,000 people. So we can derive that his response is my favorite type of response, and Brother Rupik's favorite type of response, a sarcastic one. This ain't going to cut it, Jesus. 200 denarii worth, 200 pennies worth, this is not going to be sufficient, maybe to feed 2,000, but not 15 to 20,000. The math ain't mathin'. So that's the synopsis of Philip, but it doesn't end there. Letter B, we've got the summary of Andrew. It goes from bad to worse. Look at the summary of Andrew in verse number, 8? Verse number 8, it says, one of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, saith unto him, there is a lad here which hath 5 barley loaves and 2 fishes. I wish it ended there. But then he offers this rebuttal, but what are these among so many? There's a lad here that's got 5 barley loaves and 2 fishes, but what are these among so many? And what I find interesting is the contrast between these two responses. The contrast between these two responses or these two solutions, Philip's synopsis, although probably sarcastic, was at least realistic. At least it was realistic. At least he was the realist in the situation. The hypothetical situation that he provides a solution to, if he were to take that 200 pennies worth or 200 denarii worth and to, go buy bread for all the people, it would still only feed about 13%. It would feed about 13% of the people if there was 15 to 18,000. But if you look at Andrew's response, if you take the 5 loaves and 2 fishes, that brings our 13% down to a whopping 0.1%. We're going the wrong way. We're going the wrong way. Either way that you look at it, both solutions are insufficient. And here's what I found intriguing. Rather than exhibiting great faith in a man that they've seen do far more with far less, they choose to focus on the futility of the problem in front of them. Rather than, looking at this problem and looking to their right and saying, we've got the solution. He's been traveling with us this entire time, and we've seen him do far more with far less. Rather than exhibiting great faith, they make a mountain out of a molehill in comparison to the capacity of Jesus. And before you and I are so quick to cut them off, is that not what you and I do all the time with Christ? You and I do it. It's amazing how short-lived our faith is, where we'll see God bail us out of a situation, and just a couple of days later, we're in a situation that pales in comparison to the first, yet we don't exhibit great faith. Hey, God, I know that you've bailed me out of this financial situation, but you've never seen anything like this. Hey, God, I know that you got me out of that job situation, but that was yesterday and this is today. I know that you've provided every single need that I've ever had, and you've taken nothing and you've made it something time and time again. But God, you've got to understand, this situation is vastly different. No, it's not. Our perspective is different. And they were focused on the wrong thing. They were, again, elevating the problem and the futility that was in front of them, rather than just simply looking to their right and realizing that they're walking in the midst of the man who's declared the end from the beginning, who's able to do exceeding abundantly above all that they could ask or think. And so we see the disciples fret. But number 3, I love this. We see the need is met. See what I'm doing here? The need is met. Say that with me. Say it again. The need is met. All right, so Mark's account of this miracle tells us that Jesus has the disciples separate the men on the grassy field into groups of 50s and 100. And we're not given a reason why, but some speculate that it was because of the example of Obadiah in 1 Kings in chapter number 18, when Obadiah does that same thing with the prophets of God, when he hides the prophets of God in groups of 50 in the different caves. We don't really know why Jesus separates them into groups of 50s and 100s, but nonetheless, he separates them on that large grassy plain. He distributes the 5 loaves and 2 fishes to the men, or rather the disciples, and he tells the disciples to distribute the provisions to the heads of the households, and the multitude is fed. The multitude is fed. And a lot of the times I believe that we cut the significance of this miracle short by simply just saying, this is when Jesus fed the 5,000. That's not what Jesus does. He doesn't just feed the 5,000. Matter of fact, some of you are saying, yeah, he fed 15,000. No, he did not just feed the 5,000. He didn't just feed the 15,000. Look at all 4 gospel accounts. Matthew 14, verse 20. And they did all eat and were what? All right, and they were filled. Mark 16, verse 42, and they did all eat and were what? Filled. Luke 19 and Luke 9 rather, and verse 17, and they did eat and were all what? Verse number 12 of John 6, when they were what? So we can derive, this is a Baptist crowd. They've been filled. Their innie is now an outie. They've been filled. This is so relevant today because I'm still full from yesterday. Yesterday, Brother Scott took all the pastoral staff to Fogo de Chao. And I went, and I don't know, midway through the first course, I thought I was full, but I was not full. I had more room, and I left there realizing what they meant when they were filled. Jesus fills them, and so if anything, we sell this miracle short. He doesn't just feed the 5,000, he fills the 5,000. And I'm not trying to draw application that is not there. By my own experience, that is exactly how my God works. He doesn't just meet our needs, He exceeds our needs. He doesn't just provide for what we need in the moment. Oftentimes, He chooses to give better and good gifts. Can't help but think of Brother Felipe up there in the sound booth. We were talking and reminiscing. God already provided him with a job, but now he's got a better job. Praise the Lord. What a God that we serve, where He doesn't just meet our needs and our expectations, He often exceeds them. But that actually leads to this. Lastly, real quickly, number 4. The extra is left. The extra is left. Say that with me. The extra is left. So we're not going to read, but all 4 Gospels are harmonious in the instructions that Christ would give to His disciples when it comes to the excess or the extra. He says to collect the leftovers, and by the time that the disciples collect the leftovers, how many baskets are left over? How many baskets are left over? There are 12 baskets left over, and we are not given a reason. There's not a reason. There's a lot of opinions, but there's not any reason as to why it gives the instructions to collect the leftovers, nor are we told the significance of the 12, if there is any significance. And to make an assertion right here would do a disservice to the text. When the text is silent, so must we be. We've got to be careful at allegorizing everything. I cautioned us with that in the very first lesson, but I don't want to make an assertion. Am I allowed to make an observation? Thank you for giving me permission, because I'm going to do it anyways. All right, so just an observation. When you go back to the very beginning of the miracle, John specifies that Andrew's summary is, what is this among so many? But what's interesting is when you look at the other accounts, specifically Matthew's account, Matthew groups all of the disciples at arriving at that same conclusion. So which is right? Both. Both are correct. Matthew chooses to talk about all the disciples, whereas John talks specifically about Andrew, but either way, they come to the same conclusion. Matthew 14, verse number 17, and they say unto him, we have here, keyword, but, or only, 5 loaves and 2 fishes. So the summary is the same. This isn't enough. This isn't sufficient. In other words, could I say it this way? Before the miracle, they were focused on what they lacked, to the point where they missed who they were with. I've already mentioned it, but they took the need and they elevated it beyond the one whom they were in the presence of. Beyond the one who had the capacity, again, to do exceeding abundantly above all that they could ask or think. And at the end of the miracle, they collect the remains, and how many are left over? How many are left over? 12 baskets. So here's the observation. Could it be that Jesus intentionally left 12 baskets, 1 for each disciple, as a reminder of His capability and authority to do what they discredited Him of being able to do? Could it be? Possibly. We cannot be sure that is why. We're not told. And again, I don't want to do a disservice to the text and tell you that's why there's 12 baskets. But here's what we can be assured of, and here's what this miracle teaches us. It's very important. This will help somebody tonight. In the hands of Jesus, that which is inadequate becomes excessive. And that which is insufficient becomes more than enough. When you've got a problem and you take it to your King, here's what you'll find. Again, I quote this verse all the time, but I can't get enough of it. You'll find that He is able to do exceeding abundantly above all that we could ask or think. I'll close with this. And this is an illustration I'm sure that you've heard before, but George Mueller, how many of you have heard of George Mueller? George Mueller was a man who operated orphanages in England and was known for taking every need to God in prayer rather than asking people for money. One morning, the situation seemed impossible. Hundreds of children were dressed and seated for breakfast, but there was no food in the orphanage. The cupboards were empty, the pantries were bare, and there was no visible way to provide a meal. Rather than panic, Mueller gathered the children at the table and thanked God for the food that they were about to receive. As the children sat before empty plates, a knock came at the door. A local baker stood outside and explained that he had been unable to sleep during the night before. Feeling impressed that the orphanage might have a need, he had risen early and baked fresh bread to bring to them. Soon after, another knock was heard at the door. How many of you would answer really quickly? Another knock was heard at the door. A milkman's wagon had broken down near the orphanage. Since the milk would spoil before the wagon could be repaired, he offered it to the orphanage free of charge. Within a matter of minutes, what had appeared to be an impossible situation was transformed. The children who had sat down before empty plates ate a full breakfast. It was one more reminder that God's ability is never limited by man's resources. When there seems to be nothing, God proved that he was more than enough. This is one of the most well-known miracles in the Bible, but the truth there is so significant specifically to some of the trials we prayed for just a moment ago. Some of the trials that we're praying for, they're big things. I can't help but think of Brother Cole. There are a number of different people in the room. Here's what you've got. You've got a dilemma. You've got a big problem. And here's the encouragement and what we ought to learn from this miracle. Don't get so focused on the deficiency that you miss who you're with. I was young and now I'm old, and I've never seen the righteous forsaken nor his seed begging bread. There's never been a time he's not been faithful. There's never been a time that he's not carried us through. And there's been moments in our history, for some of you, I'm trying not to look at you and make an example out of you tonight, but you've seen God do bigger with less. Yet it's hard to trust him with what's in front of you right here, right now. And so here's the admonishment to you. The same God that we read about in all four of these gospel accounts that fed the 5,000, did you know what he said about you? He said, you're much better than the sparrow. Are you not much better than they? And some of you, again, you're going through a trial, you're going through a valley, and here's my encouragement to you. Take it to the one who has the capacity and authority to do it time and time and time again. He is able. He is sufficient. Let's pray. Father, would you be with us as we head into the invitation? No, it's a simple truth. I hope it helps somebody. I know it helped me to be reminded of how I ought to walk. I ought to walk as Christ walked, moved with compassion on the multitudes. Lord, I pray that you would help me be soul conscious. People are not an inconvenience. They are the mission field. They're the target. They're who we're trying to reach. Father, I pray that you would also help our own faithlessness. It's amazing how quickly we can come out of a triumph that you've given us, and we head right back into a trial, and we do not trust the God who's just given us a victory. And so I pray that we would not follow the model of the disciples, but that we would learn to trust you more and more and more as we see you come through time and time again. Would you speak to us tonight in Jesus' name? Amen. If you'd stand to your feet, we'll have a verse of invitation.
Thank you for tuning in to our live stream service. If you would like to connect with our pastor, Lamar Ard, simply email him at pastor@woodenvalleybaptist.org. Until next time, God bless.